Oh, my babies. Oh, my babies. I love you all so much. Oh, you are my favorite things on earth. Ooh. Now go have fun now. Yes, go do what you do. Oh, my precious babies. We're gonna edit that out, right? That junk right there? Cool. Class. Yeah, I'm in my bathrobe today. It's one of those days. Yep. Looks pretty good. I think so. It's a Christmas present. Thank you. And leave a comment below if you like my bathrobe and if you think I should do more videos in my bathrobe. It's cold outside. I didn't have any work today. I didn't have school. You bet I wore my bathrobe. If you haven't noticed, I have a syndrome. Now, if there's one thing I hate more than cats, aka those sinister, fur-covered spawns of Lucifer, it's books about the wretched critters. That is why it came as some surprise, to me anyways, that one of my all-time favorite books of 2018 was Dewey, the story of a small-town library cat who melted the hearts of a community and earned international recognition. But first, a disclaimer. This video is not necessarily a book review. I mean, it is. I will be covering the book. But more importantly, it is a direct response and a negative criticism of all those who offered a negative criticism of the book itself. Haters gonna hate? Well, I got some hate coming back at you. So lube up and buckle up. I'm taking you haters for a ride in your own medicine? That can't be correct. What am I trying to say here? For those who don't know, Dewey, the small-town library cat who touched the world, is a 2008 memoir from Spencer, Iowa resident librarian Vicki Myron. The woman who found Dewey, adopted him, and promoted him to official library cat in residence. I first learned about the book in 2008 when I promptly purchased it for my mother for Christmas, and subsequently waited 10 years before reading it myself. But that's neither here nor there. The first thing that stood out to me was, what the hell is a library cat? When was that a thing? I've been to many libraries in my day. They're some of my favorite places on earth, and I've seen lots of books, a handful of computers, homeless people trying to stay warm and browsing for unsavory content on said computers. But surely no cats in a library? So yeah, I guess it's a thing. And Vicki Myron explains as much. Some libraries have resident cats, and Spencer, Iowa has one such library. It was a cold morning in 1988 when Myron discovered the abandoned young kitten in the library's return bin. She took the cat to a vet, who estimated his age to be around 8 weeks or so, and treated him for frostbite. About a week after the discovery, the local newspaper printed a story about the miracle kitten and how the library adopted it, and eventually put it on the proverbial payroll. After a contest to name the critter was held, the name Dewey Read More Books, named after Melville Dewey, who created the eponymous library classification system, won by a landslide. Hippopotamus. And since the publication of the original newspaper story, writers, journalists, and general tourists came from far and wide to see this exceptional resident of what was otherwise just your random reliable library. A film crew from Japan, of all places, came to see the critter for itself, traveling some 6,000 miles to get some 60 seconds of footage. That had to be one marvelous cat. Myron mentions these visitors from far away and at some length, but prefers to keep the story planted firmly at home. The driving theme to the memoir seems to be Dewey's... My nose itches. The driving theme of the memoir seems to be just how important Dewey became to the Spencer community and surrounding area and his impact upon them. Now, one moment that sticks out in my head especially is that of a young girl named Crystal. Crystal, a young girl of some disability, is otherwise unresponsive and oblivious to her surroundings and the people around her, until after coming in contact and interacting with Dewey, she all of a sudden opens up and becomes a completely different person, showing response and even smiling, a rare occurrence, notes Myron. So inevitably, focus shifts away from the cat and on the author, her family, and the Spencer community. And this is where readers tend to divide. Also, where I make my main point. I'm all covered in cat here. Kathleen writes, the tone of the author was grating to me, and her experiences were not nearly as interesting as she seemed to think they were. At its core, this is not At its core, this is a not uncommon tale with startlingly inflated publicity. Rated at 1 star. Carmeletta writes, I thought I was reading a book about a cat, but I wound up reading a book about a woman with a lot of troubles in her life. For every chapter that was actually about Dewey, there seemed to be 2 or 3 that were just about her. Actually, the ratio is more like every 2 chapters about Dewey, there's 1 about her. And even then, it always comes back. She goes on, that's not what I set out to read. I expected a good, light-hearted story about a cat. But every time I reached a point where my spirits were lifted, Ms. Myron brought it all crashing down with the next crisis/drama involving herself and her family. She rated it 2 stars. And Kinga writes, I thought I was going to scream if I had to read another paragraph about how amazing the town of Spencer, Iowa is. To give you a taste. She goes on, I have just read a 275-page long eulogy to Spencer and its people. She goes on, the book was really chopped. There were parts about Dewey, bits about Vicky's life, and the history of the town all thrown in together. They didn't blend very well, but I was slightly entertained by some chapters, so I'm giving it 2 stars. And last but not least, a review I thought it was actually very well written and long. I think there's 4 pages here. Bionic Jean, who gave it 2 stars, wrote at some points, she was fairly mixed on it. A charming story. I was looking forward to the rest. Then quite a lot about the town. Spencer's history started to intrude. Fair enough, though. It put everything in context. Very well. But, she also said, there's just too much history of Iowa, too much ethnography, and far too much biography and autobiography. However admirable these people are. Perhaps it would interest some readers in itself, but it is of only limited interest in a book supposedly about a cat. And she also says, my local library also has a cat. That's fantastic. This is supposed to be a book review. I'm done with this nonsense and the idiots who encourage it. Mom! Listen closely, because I'm only going to say this once. It is not, nor was ever, or intended to be, a book strictly about a cat. Dewey was born in 1988, where the book picks up. It being more than 30 years since then, you can assume inevitably where the book ends. During the period in between, Dewey enjoys eating rubber bands, walking along the bookshelves, and being carried a very specific way. That is 15 words summarizing Dewey's entire existence. But this book is 275 pages long. You want 275 pages of cat antics, go to YouTube. Well, I mean, they're not really pages, it's not in page format. Well, I mean, web page. You get the idea. Yes, Dewey is on the cover. Yes, his name is also most of the book's title, but it's also the small town library cat who touched the world. The world being of important significance here. The entire point of the book, the inspiration behind it, was how Dewey affected the author's life and the Spencer community. How he affected them. When Myron goes on these tangents about her life and her troubles and the troubles her town faces, she's providing context, background, a before snapshot to compare to the after. You cannot gauge exactly how one relatively insignificant cat affects a populace unless you have a thorough understanding and background of said populace. And that includes the rambling farm practices in Iowa throughout the 20th century. The historic backgrounds of Spencer, the in-depth portrayal of Myron's family, and the struggles of all the above provide not just crucial background, but a very worthwhile readable account, a complete narrative. Dewey simply brings the narrative full circle. That is his point. And for that, I commend the author for a thorough, complete, and thoroughly, completely entertaining read that I enjoyed to the last word. 5 stars to Vicki Myron and Bret Witter for their amazing work. 0 stars for the 0-star critics who couldn't understand a good thing when they experienced it. Thanks again for watching Mortar and Ivy and listening to me ramble and rant. I've been Johnny. You're always welcome in my neck of the cat box.